Hi everyone, Kevin from Lollar Pickups here to walk you through a full component swap on a Stratocaster guitar. And not just any Stratocaster guitar. This is a special Wayne's World Edition Squier Strat. In 1992, Fender had the Fujigen factory in Japan build a limited number of these to promote the Wayne's World movie. It's classic white with 3 single coil pickups and a whammy bar.
I'd raise the bridge, file down the nut, and take the buzz out the low E.
Side note, I'm pretty sure they meant Olympic white, but close enough. We'll go through everything involved in a full circuit swap, including pulling the original parts out, replacing the switch, the pots, the caps, and of course we'll be changing out the stock pickups for a set of Lollars. We'll even cover the basics of pickup adjustment. So stick around and see how it's done. Hey, thanks for checking out this video. Based on the countless requests we've received over the years, we're sure that many of you have been looking for some visual aids on changing control components and pickups in your guitars. It's not that uncommon for guitarists to feel overwhelmed by these kinds of tasks. Rest assured. There's really not much anyone can do to cause any sort of irreparable damage to the instrument when you're doing this sort of thing. You pretty much have to go out of your way and try to mess anything up that bad. And any mistake that you could legitimately make when attempting this can typically be fixed yourself. If you find that fails, just about any qualified guitar tech can almost instantly identify and rectify any issues that may occur. So instead of paying someone else to do the swap, why not give it a shot first? You never know, you might find it to be your new source of zen. If not, if you manage to get absolutely lost in the weeds, then you can have a tech take a look at it. But you'll never know until you try. Most players find that once they've taken something like this on, they become more comfortable and confident with their instrument, giving them a greater sense of understanding of how the whole thing works and how to service and maintain them. Today we'll be replacing all of the stock controls with the Lollar pre-wired assembly featuring a standard Strat control layout, consisting of a 5-way selector switch and volume tone controls. For the pickups, we're going with the Lollar Special 64 set, comprised of a 64 in the neck and middle and Special S in the bridge. These are all available for purchase on our website, and you can find links in the description below. Now, we won't be taking a deep dive into soldering technique here, as we've already covered that pretty thoroughly in previous Tone Truth videos. The link to that specific video can be found in the description as well. Before we get started, there are some tools that will be required and a few that, while optional, can really help along the way. The required tools are a Phillips screwdriver for removing and installing things such as the pickguard and pickups, a soldering iron, soldering station, and solder for desoldering and soldering the circuit connections. It's best to use one that will reach somewhere around 700 degrees so as to avoid damaging the pots by keeping an underpowered iron on it for too long, just to try to get the surface hot enough to melt the solder. A wrench for removing and installing the pots. We use a tool made by ESP called a multi-spanner. This is a special tool designed to remove and install the knobs and nuts on the control components. This tool makes it immeasurably easier to safely pry the knobs from the pot shafts, as well as loosening and tightening the nuts on the pots. A set of wire cutters for trimming the lead wires of the new pickups to length, and a clean and sturdy work area, somewhere that you don't mind getting a little solder on. Something burn-proof is all the better. If you ruin the top of the dining room table dripping solder all over it, you might not be happy with the results. Be aware that soldering irons and melted solder can reach very high temperatures that can damage just about any objects they come into contact with, including yourself or your workspace. Keep flammable items away from your immediate area when working with solder. As for optional materials, we suggest a soft surface, such as a towel or, as in our case, a large neoprene mat that can be laid down under the instrument to protect both the instrument's finish as well as the surface that you're working on. Non-slip surfaces are definitely best, as they can help you avoid having the instrument sliding around while you're handling a hot iron. A helping hand soldering workstation. This is helpful because it helps you to clamp all the parts in place and frees up your hands for holding the iron in one hand and the solder in the other. Strings, string winder, and a tuner, particularly if you're going to remove the strings altogether for the swap and plan to replace them afterwards. And of course an amplifier, which is the easiest way to test the connections prior to closing everything back up. That about covers the tools and materials needed for the task. We'll also put links to where these items can be purchased in the description below. Now that we have your necessities out of the way, it's time to get down to business here. We'll start by removing the strings and pickguard to allow access to the guts of this thing. On a Strat, all of your pickups and control components are affixed to the pickguard, so removing the guard essentially removes everything except the string ground wire and the output jack from the guitar. But then of course you'll still need to remove them from the pickguard to make the swap. For now, I'll give myself some room to work here by first desoldering the string ground and the output jack that are connected to the volume pot. To do this, simply heat these connections until the solder is melted and pull the wires away from the pot. Once that's done, I can actually move the guitar away from my workspace. And now I can remove the pickups and the controls from the pickguard. There's no right or wrong order to remove these things, provided you're replacing it all anyway. That having been said, saving the pickups for last will provide a little more protection from damage and mishandling them, as they can't flop around when screwed to the pickguard. So for this reason, I'll start by removing the controls first, and then move on to the pickups when I'm finished with that. Now that we have all the original parts removed, we'll start with the installation of the new components. The Lollar pre-wired control assemblies make this super simple. Just unscrew the screws and nuts to remove the entire assembly from the mounting card that it ships on, and then drop the entire thing into your pickguard, one single unit, no disassembly or reassembly required. At most, you may need to make some minor adjustments or tweaks to the spacing between components to accommodate differences in pickguard control layout, if any. Once the controls are in your pickguard, install the screws and nuts to secure them in place. With the controls installed, we can now move on to the pickup installation. So I'll get them into the pickguard and screw it into place. We're not really concerned with the height of the pickups at this point, as we will need to have the guitar fully reassembled, strung, and tuned to pitch in order to measure the pickup height in relation to the strings anyway. All that's really needed at this point is enough tension on the mounting screws to hold the pickups securely into place. With the pickups and controls installed, we can start with the routing of the lead wires and soldering to get this thing up and running. You'll need to take your instrument's routed cavity into consideration here. Some guitar bodies have just enough space to allow for the pickups to fit and have narrow channels for the lead wires to traverse, while others will have much more of a broad route, often referred to as a swimming pool route, which offers just about universal pickup accommodation and allows for a lot more slop in the installation process. Either way, you can choose to keep your wires neat and tidy, or just let them flop around as they will inside the given space. This also applies to trimming the lead wires. Your pickups will work just fine with the full-length lead wires intact, but they may be more susceptible to noise, such as 60 and 120 cycle interference. The more wires stuffed in there, the more surface they can act as an antenna for noise, but the shorter the line, the less interference there will be. Some folks also like to twist the leads to keep everything tidy, both aesthetically and sonically, as doing so also helps reduce hum and noise interference. But hey, it's your guitar, you're free to put as much or as little effort into it as you feel. Even if only for credibility's sake, we're going to go with the twisted and tidy method. So we'll twist our lead wires from each individual pickup together, run the white or yellow hot lead from the pickup to the switch, and the black ground lead wire to the back of the first pot for ground, routing according to the body's cavity, and then clip them off, leaving just a small amount extra just in case. Maybe an inch or so at most. Our pre-wired assemblies and pickups both ship with wiring diagrams to assist in knowing what gets soldered where during installation. Following these as your guides, plan your connections accordingly. So now we can start soldering our connections. I like to start with the hot leads, which on a Fender style pickup, like these, are either white or yellow, depending on the pickup's position. Then when they're all soldered, I'll connect all the pickup's ground wires to the back of the volume pot all together at once. I'll start with a bridge pickup, which will have its white lead wire soldered to the first lug on the left side of the switch, and I'll route the black ground wire to the back of the first pot, which is the guitar's volume control. Next, the middle pickup will have its yellow lead wire soldered to the second lug of the left side of the switch. Then I'll solder the neck pickup's white lead wire to the third lug on the left side of the switch, and then solder the black ground lead along with the bridge and middle pickups black lead wires to the back of the volume pot. It's a bit easier to do this if you slightly twist the wires together to ensure that they all stay together as the melted solder cools. You want to see that all 3 ground wires have flush and solid contact with the back of the pot to ensure good continuity to ground. Now we can move on to the string ground wire and the output jack connections. The bridge ground wire and the black ground wire from the jack can be joined together and soldered to the ground on the back of whichever pot you choose in the same manner as the pickup ground wires. And then finally, the output jack's hot lead will be soldered to the center lug of the volume pot. Once these connections have all been made, you can plug the guitar into your amp and check all of your connections. To do this, I like to methodically check all the components in each of the selector switch positions to ensure that everything is acting as it should. First, I'll put the selector in position 1, or the bridge position. Then I'll use the tip of my screwdriver to very gently tap on the pull pieces of the bridge pickup to ensure that I can hear the tapping coming from the amp. Assuming all is good in the switch connections, I'll move on to checking my controls. Roll the volume down and back up while tapping the poles, and I hear the tapping sound get softer and louder as I turn the knob. Do the same with the third knob, which is the bridge and middle tone control. It should sound brighter with the knob up and darker when lower. I'll also tap on the other pickups to make sure that I don't hear them in this position. You can repeat this process for the remaining 4 pickup selector switch positions, remembering that the selector positions are as follows. Position 1 is the bridge pickup, 2 is the bridge and middle, 3 is just the middle, 4 is the middle and neck, and 5 is neck alone. As for the volume and tone controls, the volume will affect all positions the same, but the tone controls are different. The middle knob, or tone control 1, controls only the tone for the neck pickup, and the last knob, or tone control 2, is the control for both bridge and middle tones. So the tone controls will work in concert with the selector switch as follows. Positions 1, 2, and 3 use tone control 2. Position 4, tone controls 1 and 2. And in position 5, tone control 1. The graphic on the screen can be used to illustrate all of this for you. Now that we've confirmed the functionality of all components, we can sew this thing back up. Simply drop the pickguard back into place, ensuring that all wires are safely routed through the cavity and being careful not to short any wires or connections out on anything else. There have been times when I've put everything back together only to realize that I've accidentally grounded something out on the body shielding tape, which just cut out my sound altogether. An easy way to avoid this is to make sure that none of the components are making contact with anything other than where they are secured to the back of the pickguard by screw or nut. When everything is back together and all of the pickguard screws are back in place, you can restring the guitar and tune it up to pitch. With the instrument ready to go, it's time to adjust the pickup height. This is where things become more or less subjective. Some folks like to have the pickups closer to the strings for a louder and more strident sound, whereas others prefer to have the pickups a bit further from the strings for a bit softer output and rounder overall response. Neither nor anywhere in between is necessarily right or wrong. If it's your guitar and you like it, then it's right for you. To make these adjustments, the old idiom lefty-loosey, righty-tighty is applicable. Only maybe it's more fitting to say lefty-lower, righty-raise. To raise the pickups, simply think of righty-tighty, turn the screw clockwise, and the pickup will rise up. To lower it is lefty-loosey, or counterclockwise, and the pickup will drop back down into the cavity. You don't want to loosen it to the point that the screw backs all the way out and the pickup falls beneath the pickguard into the body. If this happens, you'll have to remove the strings and pickguard to reinstall the pickup into your pickguard. Common sense prevails here. We do have some basic guidelines that we think are a good starting point for most players. For Strats and most other Fender-style single coils, we suggest that you start by setting the pickup height at about 1/8 of an inch from the strings, with the string depressed at the last fret. Do this on all of the pickups and at both the first and sixth strings. From there, you can plug back into your amp and use your ears to fine-tune things. Again, the closer you are to the string, the louder, brighter, and more focused the sound will be. As you get the pickups further away, you start to hear a broader range of the string's deflection, but the output drops. Finding that balance that you prefer takes some trial and error. The only thing you really need to keep in mind to avoid is when getting the pickups too close to the string, you can cause magnetic interference with the string's natural motion. This will usually show up as modulation in the string's pitch, as the magnets in the pickup can actually pull the strings closer as they move toward the center of deflection. This makes the notes sound like they're going a little sharp and flat as they sustain. Getting the pickup too close can also slow down the string's vibration, choking some of the natural sustain as well. And of course, if they get way too close, you can run into issues where the string contacts the pull pieces, which is characterized by a sudden, unpleasant, and loud pop coming from your amp. If you encounter any of these things, simply back the pickups off a few turns of the screws and check it again, repeating until you have fixed the issue. The final variable to consider when adjusting your pickups is whether you prefer to have the 3 positions as balanced as possible in output or tone, or whether you want to maximize each position for its own strength. For example, you might want to ensure that there's little perceivable change in volume when switching from one position to the next. Or you may feel that you want the hottest bridge output as close as possible, but the fullest and warmest neck tone further away. This is where your personal taste and ears come in. Again, if you think it sounds good and it accomplishes your goals, then it's right for you. For my guitar, I'll balance the neck and bridge as closely as possible, then adjust the middle a little bit lower to allow for my preferred balance in the 2 and 4 positions, as well as to make a little room for strumming with the pick. So now we're going to go ahead and just plug in so we can listen to the balance and make sure everything sounds good. This is where you can really fine-tune everything to your ear, and you can make sure that one pickup seems in balance with the next. Perfect. I love it. All right, now that we have everything installed and adjusted, let's see how it sounds. Perfect. Well, there you have it. A complete component swap for a Stratocaster. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this useful, and if you have any questions about Strat pickups, pre-wired control assemblies, or anything else that we offer, you can reach our customer service team by phone or email at the contacts on your screen. And if you want to know when we add content like this in the future, as well as product demos and more, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the other videos we've created for you. Thanks again. I know! Let's do the Scooby Doo ending! Diddle-doo, 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 diddle-doo. Well, there you have it. A complete component swap for a Stratocaster. Thanks for watching.
Let's just find out who you really are. It's old man Lollar, who owns the haunted pickup manufacturing company.
And I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.